Wait, Tony, can you hear me? I turned the volume on my phone all the way up, disconnecting the call from the Mercedes. No service out here in BFE, bum-fucking Eagpeat. And quite literally, too. Well, as long as Egypt, the remote Appalachian village of 250 residents, in eastern Kentucky counts. Tony, just repeat the address one more time for me, will you? My service keeps going in and out. 6.66 Shane. Saw Lane, came the jagged sounds of Tony's voice through the phone speaker. Tony, I chuckle, you're kidding me, right? 666 Chainsaw Lane? No ooh, came more cackled remnants from my investment manager. It's spelled in like a French way. Right. Anyway, dude's name is what, again? Do you read any your emails? Ass hole? Of course not, I shoot back. I'm just the pretty face for your commercials and postcards. Name? John Doe. Mr. John Doe of 666 Chainsaw Lane. I'm sure he is wonderful at parties. Colin. You prick. Oh, I love when you tell me sweet nothings, Tony, I tease. Call you later. I end the call and enter the address in the GPS. It's only a 25-minute drive, but with each minute I'm taken deeper and deeper into the Appalachian woods. No street lamps, of course. The dwindling light from the late afternoon struggles to make it through the dense tree canopies as I get closer to John Doe's home. Which, at this point, seems like it may be the only home in the entire area. I look outside my driver's side window at the silhouette of trees, the forest beyond them like a black void. This place is really having me embrace nature, I like it. Finally, I see a rusted mailbox, stuffed with rolls of newspaper suffocating on top of one another, dangling on a wood post with 666 engraved on its side. This must be the place. I pull into an overgrown, dirt driveway that looks as if it hasn't seen a vehicle in ages. It is long and winding, and then about an acre in, I see a small ranch home nestled between crowded trees. Cozy. All of the timber siding is rotted, and aged 2x4s are haphazardly nailed across every window. The grass is tall, and reaches all the way up to the middle of the windows. This dude needs a lawnmower. I step out of the car and begin the trek to the house, my eyes on the ground in case I step in a hole or even worse, animal feces. This guy seems like the type to have a few feral dogs running around. But as I head to the front door, I see something metal sticking out of the grass. What the? I narrowly miss the bear trap. Jesus H. Christ. I catch my breath. This guy takes home security very seriously. Avoiding any further booby traps, I make it to the door and give it a knock. I wait a minute or two until I hear slow, heavy footsteps approaching from inside the house. John Doe begins to open the door. Holy shit, these hinges need some gnarly greasing. The door continues its painful scream as he deliberately takes time to unveil himself. Finally, with the door fully open, I take in his appearance. John Doe is extraordinarily tall, his shaved head inches from the ceiling. He wears a canvas apron that extends past his knees, sporting all kinds of miscellaneous spills and stains. His nails are unusually long, and his hands are caked with what could be dirt or some other unidentifiable dried substance. But what is most striking about John Doe is his face. Well, only because I cannot see it because it's disguised by a filthy hockey mask. The only visible feature I can see are the gray eyes staring at me like he's trying to infiltrate my soul. Not everyone cares about being fashion forward, I get it. And who likes seeing salespeople at your front door? No one. But it's time for business. First step. If a client opens the door, give your spiel as fast as you possibly can. Hi, Mr. Doe, is it? I'm Colin Smith of Fib Investments, a leading firm that specializes in identifying key tourism prospects for up-and-coming communities and offering life-changing opportunities for its current residents. We have found that Egypt, full of quaint charm and wonderful mountain views, is just the place that travelers want to visit on vacation to escape the city life. And sir, your house sits on prime real estate. John Doe stands silent in the doorway, yet to break his stare. Sweet, he's interested. But you seem like the kind of guy that likes people to give it to him straight, John. Is it okay if I call you John? Got your name off the city records. So here's the deal, we're going to buy your house for an exorbitant amount of money, kick you out, demo the place, rebuild it with the cheapest materials possible, then list it as an Airbnb to get rich, yuppie couples to spend $500 a night here, not including the cleaning fee, so we can make even more money than we offered you to bulldoze this shithole. In short, I could say we're experts in gentrifying everyone's favorite hidden gem neighborhoods and converting them into little tourism pits. But, we'll make you rich. How does that sound? John Doe continues to stand like a statue. Dude hasn't even blinked yet. Phew, this is going to be a hook, line and sinker sale. And, I got even better news for you, John. I continue, if you let me in for a tour and show me that the inside of this house has even greater value. I can write more zeros on this blank check of mine so that by next week, you'll be shirtless on a beach in Cabo drinking a Mai Tai out of coconut. Does that sound like a good deal to you, John? I put on my best salesperson smile and dazzle him with my pearl white veneers. John Doe turns back inside his house, leaving the door open. I can tell he is a man selectful with his words. I like it. I take this as an invitation to enter. The front door leads right into what some may call a living room. Except this living room has no furniture or light fixtures. It's just a plain, open room with John standing in the center. Wow! Very spacious, I compliment. You take down some of the wood on all the boarded up windows and I bet this place has stellar natural lighting. John, silent and stoic, continues to stare. I swear this dude has not blinked once. From this vantage point, I can see the kitchen. I mean, the place is small. Cramped even. I begin to walk to it, John not making an attempt to lead the way, and take in my surroundings with my back to him. The kitchen is mostly barren. There is a small fridge, a utility sink full of what looks like clothes, purses, and shoes, and a stove littered with pots and pans, with gnats doing figure eights over the range. You know, you have a very minimalistic vibe going on here, John. Very on trend. I turn around and John inches away from me. Wow! For as massive as he is, he was silent as a mouse. I gesture to his apron. I notice you've gotten quite a lot of use from your apron. Big cook, I take it? Like to grill? I just got some Wagyu beef as a gift from one of our clients. I'm stoked to go home and cook it up. I won't do this. Have you ever had Wagyu before, John? John says nothing. Yeah, it's not for everyone, I get it. Sometimes, I prefer the good old sirloin. I'm vegan. After our conversation in the kitchen, he leads me down the hall to what appears to be a bedroom. But once again, there's no furniture in it to indicate its use. The only thing in the room is some avant-garde wall decor. Mostly just handcuffs chained to the wall. I look down on the floor and see brown puddles of what could be dried blood. Ooh, original hardwood floors. None of that laminate shit. This is definitely adding another zero to your check, sir. I leave the room not expecting him to reply and hope he takes my eagerness as a sign to continue the tour. He leads me further down the hall to a barricaded door with 5 lock systems. John reaches under his apron and starts fidgeting with his belt. He pulls out a massive iron ring full of keys. John takes his time opening the locks and then steps aside to open the door. The door has the same creak as the front, except this time, an odor creeps up the stairs that burns my nose. There are no lights, but I assume this must be the basement. It's where I'd keep all my smelly shit, too. John watches my expression as if waiting for me to say something. I just smile. He steps in front of me and starts walking down the steps in the pitch black. I follow him, waving my hands around trying to feel for a railing, until I hear John reach for something metal sounding. John pulls a chain and a single light bulb flickers on as I reach the bottom step. The basement is a small box of gray concrete. There are no laundry machines or moving boxes or Christmas decorations. Just a few human bodies piled in the corner. I pinch my nose and tiptoe to the carcasses. Yep, dead. I look back at John. Alright, so we got an unfinished basement. I look at the bodies, and a small rodent problem. But guess what? No biggie. We can work with this. We're going to demo this hunk of junk anyway. John blinks. I think I sold the deal, hell yeah. I follow him back up the stairs until we are standing face to face in the living room. So after the tour, I'm happy to add another zero to your check, Mr. Doe. I extend my hand and offer a handshake. He continues his $1 million stare. I continue anyway. Fib Investments will buy this property for $475,000. We can direct deposit this into your account in about 48 hours if you're willing to digitally sign a few papers. John blinks. Great. I'll go get my iPad out of the car. You're going to be a rich man, my friend. Congrats. After I go through all the legal mumbo-jumbo bullshit with John and he lets me sign his signature for him, I say my goodbye and head to my car to leave. The sun is just starting to set and I wait until I'm out of Egypt to give Tony a call. He answers after 2 rings. Colin, you have service. Cool, you're not dead. So how was it? Smooth as butter. Dude looked like he'd never seen an iPad before. PSH, boomers. But, I need to tell you something. Something I saw today. I need to get it off my chest. What? What is it? Tony says hastily. Inside John Doe's home I saw. Saw what? Spit it out, Colin. I saw my future, Tony. Minimalism. I am deep cleaning my apartment when I get back, dude. I am so inspired right now. Great. So happy for you, he says, slick with sarcasm. Anyway, congrats on another sale, brother. You just made us another $1 million richer. What can I say? I joke to Tony. I'm just really good with people. The story's the same every year. Light the candles, blow them out, eat the cake. I smile while everyone sings, I party with my friends, I have a few drinks, and I go home. Then, the second the clock hits 3:27, I sit up straight in bed and wait for my bones to break. It's an ugly sight, my limbs cracking and twisting, and the smell of blood and marrow isn't exactly the most appetizing thing. But the worst part for me, without a doubt, is the sound. The crunch and pop of bone, the whine of stretching skin, the wet splat of blood and offal. I've never gotten used to it, even after 27 years. I can't crack open a soda can or stretch a rubber band for days afterwards without a chill running up my spine. It's embarrassing and awkward and kind of like all of the worst parts of puberty squeezed into 10 minutes, though with maybe a little less acne. It also puts a serious damper on the possibility of any birthday sex. I try not to be too bitter about it. My mom says it's normal, that it runs in the family. Apparently, her cousin in Fresno has the exact same problem, except she goes through it every time she gets her period, so in a way, I guess I got lucky. No one's really sure what the cause is. I've heard genetic disorders, werewolf bites, even a curse, but whatever the reason, the problem remains the same. Every year, at exactly the time of my birth, my body breaks, twists, and rearranges itself, and the next morning, I see a completely different person when I look into the mirror. When I was younger and down about the whole thing, my mom tried to make me feel better by saying I was like a butterfly emerging from its cocoon. After I turned 13, she stopped trying to make me feel better. This year, it's my 27th birthday and my 27th face. I don't even bother trying to go to sleep. I just stay awake, scrolling on my phone, counting down the minutes till the change. Thankfully, it doesn't hurt, emotional and psychological damage aside. By now, I've learned to plan ahead. There's a plastic cover on the bed to make sure I don't stain my sheets. When the transformation finally comes, it's sudden, a slight twinge in my bones the only warning I receive. I do my best to breathe through it, To relax and just ride out the wave. My ribs go concave. My fingers bend backward. My teeth shift in their gums and my vision blurs. When my new body finally settles, I wiggle my toes first, just to test things out. Everything seems to have gone smoothly. If anything, it seems to be getting easier with age. I won't know for sure until I measure, but I think I've grown a few inches this time around. I swing my feet over the edge of the bed and pad barefooted to my bathroom to inspect the damage in the mirror. Last year, my face was soft and sweet, the kind that made you feel safe spilling secrets and sharing smiles. This time around, my cheekbones are higher, my chin a little pointier. When I smile, my right incisor is crooked. It's bad enough that anyone would tell me to get braces, but it's not like there'd be much point. I'll have a completely different smile in a year's time anyway. I start practicing expressions. Anger, then excitement, then despair. I cycle through the range of human emotions, trying each one on for size. I don't like this face nearly as much as the last one. She looks a lot meaner. I curl my lip, tug at the skin under my eyes. Everything feels foreign and out of place, stretched too thin or pulled too tight. I'm going to have to change the placement of my blush again. I'm deep in the throes of my examination when my phone buzzes against the counter. My mom's face smiles up at me from the screen, bugging me for a video call. She stays up late every year and dials my number the second the clock hits 3:45, ready to see my new face for herself. "Hey, sweetie." Her voice bounces off the bathroom tile. "Ooh, I like this one. You look very svelte." "Hey, Mom." How she manages to have so much energy at this hour is beyond me. "Did everything go all right?" she asks. "No hiccups this time?" "No, Mom, no hiccups." After my leg had gotten stuck facing the wrong way in 4th grade, my mom always checked to make sure things went smoothly. "Well, that's great." She's holding the camera too close to her face, her wrinkles on full display. It looks like she's lying in bed. I can hear my dad snoring in the background. "I'm very proud of you." Supportive to the end, like always. It's easy for her to be encouraging. She's kept the same face her entire life. "You look a little familiar." She squints at my face through her readers. "Did you have this face once before?" I blink. "That's a new one." I've never repeated a face before. Frankly, if that was an option, I would have picked one and stuck with it ages ago. No, I'm pretty sure it's new," I said. My mom takes a closer look, biting her tongue. "Are you sure? I could have sworn I've seen you somewhere before." "I'm your daughter, Mom," I sigh. "You've seen me plenty of times before. The whole thing makes me crazy enough as it is if I think about it for too long, and an inquisition from my mom is the last thing I need. Look, I'm pretty tired, and I've got work tomorrow. I'm fine, everything went fine, and I look fine. Can I call you back tomorrow?" "Of course, sweetie," my mom chirped. "I'm just happy to see your face." "Ha. I love you. I'll call you tomorrow." "Love you too, Mom. Thanks for calling. Get some rest. Oh, and happy birthday." She waves at her phone, then hangs up, leaving me alone in the bathroom, face harshed by the white fluorescent lights. I take one last look, drinking it all in. This is what I have to work with for the next year. Best to get comfortable with it now. The face of a stranger stares back at me, tired and slightly judgmental. My face just looks more sour. I sigh and flick off the lights, wandering back to my room. I peel the plastic off my bed and crawl under the covers, doing my best to ignore the new sensation of air on my toes as my feet poke out from my too short sheets. The transformation always tires me out. It only takes a moment for me to fall asleep. 3 hours later, my alarm shrieks and yanks me awake. I take a minute to curse myself out for being too dumb to call out of work. I unlock my phone, with a passcode, no face or fingerprint ID for me, and turn off the alarm before taking a few precious seconds to stare at the ceiling. New year, new me, same piece of shit job. My clothes are all wrong now, selected for a body that no longer exists. My pants are showing a lot more ankle, and my shirt suddenly has a lot of extra fabric around the chest. I fix up a big breakfast to satisfy my stomach. The transformation isn't painful, but it always leaves me ravenous for the next few days. The walk to my car is quick. Turns out adding a few extra inches of height really helps you cover ground faster. I catch a few strange looks as I walk by, but it's hardly anything new. My neighbors are used to a completely different woman leaving my apartment each morning, so they're allowed a bit of light staring. One girl lets out a sharp gasp upon seeing me, her face drained of blood. Ha! It's a slightly stronger reaction than what I'm used to, and it's almost enough for me to stop and explain, but her friends shush her and usher her along before I get the chance. My car is cheap and dirty, but it's tolerated quite a few bumps against the curb, and it always waits patiently for me in the parking lot. I feel like my car fit my last face better. My current appearance seems more suited for something sleek and mean, not an old beater. When I hop in, my knees fold up against the steering wheel. The seat hums as I push it back, and I catch another glimpse of my eyes as I adjust the mirrors. The color may be different, but the heavy purple shadows underneath them are something I've gotten used to, no matter what face I wear. The drive to work sucks, like it always does, 27 minutes through gridlock and top 40 hits mixed with the news on the radio. Some prick in a green Volvo won't let me merge, and I lay on the horn with gusto. Asshole. My voice is almost louder than the horn, and I make a rude gesture as I draw even with him. The Volvo revs its engine and speeds off, leaving me with a cloud of foul black exhaust. Killed in a drunk driving accident at 3:15. The obnoxiously perky radio host is running down the morning news instead of playing my top 40 hits like any decent radio station should. I crank the dial to the next station in a huff. It goes from depressing news to dad rock from the 70s. I cut to the left lane and try not to smile as I pass the Volvo, now stuck behind an old woman in a beat-up sedan. Work is a different flavor of miserable today. Being a low-level assistant at a PR firm is already a special kind of hell, filled with groveling and matcha lattes, but there's a tension in the air that usually means I'm about to deal with an extra pile of shit. One girl rushes by, tugging on a broken heel with one hand and taking notes on her phone with the other. The intern is in the corner apologizing profusely on a headpiece, sweat beading his brow. The TV on the wall is playing the news at full blast, a much higher volume than my manager normally allows. Lucy says it throws off her internal monologue, but apparently whatever's playing is more important today. Even the news anchor looks a little somber, her blonde wig deflated and limp. She's covering the death of some celebrity, sporting a picture-perfect pout. I can feel a headache pulsing behind my eyes already. I really should have called out. Holly sits at the center of the chaos, phone in hand, feet propped up on her desk, chomping on a stick of electric blue raspberry gum. She's humming a K-pop song I faintly recognize under her breath. Morning, I say, heading over to the only safe haven. You know what's going on? It seems kind of tense. Morning. Holly blows a bubble and scrolls twice. Not a clue. How the lead receptionist could get away with caring so little was beyond me. You already send somebody for coffee? I ask. I'm hoping the answer is yes. You know that's your job, she says. Damn it. Caramel frap with extra whip, please. I think they said they were out of caramel yesterday. What? She groans and finally looks up at me. When she does, her jaw drops. Whoa, you look different. My birthday was yesterday, Holly, we've been over this. I know my situation is a little unique, but I've been working here for 5 years. She's had plenty of time to get used to it. She chews on her gum, staring thoughtfully at my face. You look kind of familiar, she says. Really? That's the second time I've heard that today. Yeah, I swear I've seen you somewhere before. She narrows her eyes and studies my face before snapping her fingers. Got it. You look just like my cousin Hannah. Is that a good thing? I ask. She blows another huge bubble and it pops over her lips. I mean, it could be worse. Apparently satisfied, she turns back to her phone. Oh, By the way, Lucy said she wanted you to stop by her office before you grab coffee. Sorry. Forgot to mention it earlier. Great. My headache sharpens to an ice pick jammed into my skull. Lucy's usually too busy dealing with celebrities to focus on the assistants. It's not a great sign if I've got her attention, but there's no choice but to face her down. As I walk to her office, the door swings open and Kirsten runs out, her face shining with tears. That can't be good. I start to feel queasy on top of the headache. Maybe Lucy's in one of her firing moods, and this is the day I finally get laid off. Come in. Her voice sounds suspiciously perky. I journey into the lion's den. Lucy's office is clean and fresh in a way that tells me she rules with an iron fist at home. She's got one of those fancy multicolored keyboards designed to have quiet keys, and the soothing sounds of water running filter through the speakers. It's all very zen. Lucy's looking out the window, chin in her hand. I'm fully prepared to lose my job. Picking up fraps and Americanos only nets so much good favor. So, when she turns around, sees me, and bursts into tears, I'm a little shocked. Thank God you're all right. She leaps out of her chair and wraps me in a bear hug. I give her an awkward pat on the back. Yeah, everything's fine, I say. Lucy knows about my problem, but she's never really seemed to worry about me that much. Half of the time, I'm convinced she doesn't really know my name. I'm not sure when we got so close. I was so worried, she sobs. What are you talking about? I gently peel her off of me and look her in the eyes. This happens every year, Lucy. It was my birthday yesterday. Lucy's brow furrows. Your birthday? She trails off. Wait, Jan, is that? The tears dry abruptly, and she lets me go and takes 3 steps back. Her jaw hangs open, her eyes blown wide with fear. I shift uncomfortably. Lucy's been through this whole thing before, so this reaction seems a little unnecessary. I'm half wondering if I managed to miss something on my face during last night's inspection. Maybe I've got a lazy eye? Of course it's me, Lucy. We've gone over this a few times, I gently prod. Lucy's mouth still hasn't fully closed. I consider whether tossing a paperclip on her tongue would be worth losing my job. Instead of dignifying me with a response, she moves to her desk and furiously types something in with shaking hands. She beckons me over to view her monitor, face grim. She's pulled up a news article, fresh from this morning, with a picture of a grisly car accident splashed front and center. Young starlet killed in accident, the headline reads. My mouth goes dry. The article continues. Supermodel Megan Rogers was killed in a head-on collision with a drunk driver at 3:15 this morning. Authorities are still searching for the culprit. If you have any tips, call the number below. I know that name. Megan Rogers was one of our clients, a new big name to help out the firm. Lucy had been thrilled about it. I'd never met the lady in person, but I knew she was supposed to be the new hot thing right now. Explain this, Lucy says. I stare back at her. Sure, her death was sad, but it had nothing to do with me. I'm not sure what you're talking about. I'm walking through a verbal landmine, and I'm worried I've got bigger problems than just losing my job. You will be in a second, Lucy says. She scrolls down a little further through the article, and that's when I see the picture. Same strong nose, same brown eyes, same twist to the upper lip. Hell, even the same crooked incisor. Most damning, though, are the little things. The slope of her shoulders. The curve of her nostrils. The slant of her brow. It's a face that is new to me, but intimately familiar. It's the face of a dead woman, but it can't be, because it's my own face, clear as day, staring right back at me. Now, I know about your little situation, Lucy says, but you can see why this might leave me with a few questions. I can barely hear her over my own racing thoughts. I've cycled through different faces and bodies my entire life. Tall, fat, weak, ugly, stunning, I've had the pleasure of seeing it all. My whole life, I had thought that they were fresh faces, a sort of rebirth, with no history to bog them down, no strings attached. But this changes everything I knew, a complete upending of my reality. As poor dead Megan Rogers' face stares accusingly at me, one question plays on repeat in my mind, drowning out everything around me. Have I been wearing the faces of the dead? He hadn't meant to idealize her, to put her on a pedestal, to overwhelm. Radiant, she was. She drew people in, shook their hands, pulled up chairs for them. Are you the organizer? She'd been asked. No, she wasn't. Just a woman with a smile, a woman in a sundress who scooted over and made room for others. What was her name again? And then she directed her smile at him, her warmth, her questions. Mathieu stirred in his seat, gripped tight the neck of his bottle so as not to tremble. He did that sometimes, or rather, the nerves did, as though they were an entity of their own. What does your tattoo mean? She asked, leaning in, both hands on the edge of her seat as though to anchor her curiosity. Juvenile energy, something young and endearing about her gap-toothed smile. I drew it, said Mathieu. A ghost, an illustration he'd scribbled in his notebook the day his dad ignored his new shoes, leather. He'd traded in his scruffy Vans and their worn tongues because real men, not boys, wore real shoes. Really? Said the woman, wide-eyed. What does it mean? Cliché question, but it was she who'd asked it. I think I felt invisible, he said. What does that feel like? Right. How would she know? And how would he know that she was more than a bubbly personality, a pretty face, a question mark? Do you listen to everything others say, or do you stare through them? Do you see what isn't there? Cafe, worn leather seats, pamphlets scattered across the windowsill. Mathieu stuttered, hands jittery as he spoke, responded. Had she noticed? Her eyes fell upon his trembling fingers, his body quivering like the crown of a tree, voice rustling as light as leaves. So, what brings you to Lille? He asked. Silence. Filled the silence. He felt too visible beneath her gaze, fiddling with a sugar sachet. He watched as her lips moved in response, how a smile flittered here, there, disappeared. How her eyes crinkled. Brown-green? Hazel? Freckles sprinkled across her sunburnt cheeks. Dead skin on her nose peeling like dry glue, nasal hair untrimmed, upper lip in need of a wax, though plump and pink and soft, he bet. She was far from perfect, she was an ordinary individual with ordinary flaws and ordinary ideas, mediocre, even. He wouldn't idealize her, not this time, not again. She'd do. Just like this, just as she was. And my, hadn't he grown? Aware of his own patterns, he was. What about you? She asked. What about me? Pourquoi es-tu venu à Lille? Sweet accent, hers. Her voice changed in French, regressed, rather. The voice of a girl, always curious, always inquiring, douce, and he might just burst with nervous laughter, might just grab her hand, kiss her feet. Happy, he was, merely to be in her orbit. Happy, he was, to sit across from her in an orange summer dress, doe-eyed, as pretty as a present with ribbon tied. But he was no longer one to idealize, remember? And happy, it was the right word, ordinary, just like him and just like her. At least that's what he told himself. But you don't know me, said Nora, head propped up on a pillow. I know, said Mathieu. I've been reminding myself that you're just another individual, too, and that you're flawed. That I'd have to accept that version of you. It sounds like you've been thinking a lot about me. I have. Idealizing me, really. I'm trying not to, hence why I've been thinking about your flaws. But that's also obsessive. I don't want to be anybody's limerent object. It's reductive. Dehumanizing, even. You know, nobody ever sees me. They project their fantasies, their desire, onto me. And that guy from the language exchange, for example, Laurent, he's already grabbed my waist multiple times, even though I flinched and pulled away. I can't just be. Ever, it seems. Well, Now you're making me feel guilty for being attracted to you. We can go back to being friends if it makes you feel better, but I'm not sure I'd be able to." "Maybe," said Nora, dragging herself out of bed. "Coffee?" "Hi Mathieu, I think we got carried away last night, and I'm feeling a little uncomfortable. Is it okay if we go back to being platonic? If so, are we still on for the fireworks? I would bring my friend along." Send. Pages and pages of text. Nora scrolled indefinitely. Disproportionate, it was. "You can't tell me how to feel, my feelings are mine, and I care about you now. You initiated intimacy. Don't tell me not to get attached. I don't resent you but." Page. After. Page. Like kissing him was a contract. "You're afraid of intimacy, but deep down I think you're open to a romantic connection. It's just that you've been hurt before. You're closed off, sure, but you're just scared." Page. After. Page. Like kissing him was a sentence. He'd made her tea and microwaved leftovers, kissed her while she was drunk, and now she was emotionally responsible for this near stranger? 3 times, they'd met. First, the language exchange. Then, coffee. Finally, at a bar after a bad date. And now he expected love as though it were an exchange, a currency, a food stamp. Starving, he was, and he devoured the thought of her, licked the bones clean. "Mathieu," she wrote, "I'm feeling overwhelmed. You've crossed several of my boundaries and now you're psychoanalyzing me whom you don't know. Maybe I'm afraid of intimacy, sure, but not with you. I simply don't want to be with you, and that's okay." Nora flinched at his response. "You should be more considerate about the feelings of those you decide to initiate intimacy with." "Hi Mathieu, we don't know each other well enough to be having this kind of conversation or this level of emotional intensity. It's inappropriate and unfair. I won't have it." Blocked her, he did. Unblocked, new message, "Sure, I shouldn't have sent you all that at once, but I stand by what I said. And it's none of my business what you're like with other men regardless of my opinion. And I was dishonest about my emotions yesterday because I felt used and rightfully so. Just send me your bank details so I can pay you back for the beers you insisted on buying me despite me expressing my discomfort. But I wish you the best here in Lille. We don't own the rights to how we're perceived or imagined by others. But that doesn't mean it isn't violating." What had he done with the thought of her? And why could she feel it? Why was it palpable? Why could she smell it hanging in the air like spoiled milk? Why could she taste it in every forkful of instant noodles? She pushed her bowl aside, fork cluttering against the porcelain. She'd lost her appetite. Dry gagged. Everything tasted, sounded, smelled of him taking liberties with the idea of her, pulling her apart and reassembling her like a Mrs. Potato Head, all the while unaware that he was doing it, that he'd reduced her to a plaything and stuck ears where they didn't belong, chose his favorite set of eyes, removed the mouth. Who needs one, anyway, when you're a blank face projected onto? Arbitrary, you're rendered. But you have just enough of an identity, of individuality, to serve as the screen, to personify all their desires and projections, and for them to think it's not their imagination but you. Nightmares sometimes linger, their fingerprints loud and luminescent on the waking world. Nora lay in bed, heart pounding in her chest. He'd followed her, he had. Wide awake. Bad dream. And now she rose, afraid she'd find him outside her apartment door or in her stairwell. Fasten the chain lock, she did. Shut the curtains 3 stories high. Turned on the kitchen light above the stove to dispel the darkness should it morph into a man who'd lived God knows what with the fantasy of her, a man who resented her autonomy, her boundaries, her refusal to assume the role he'd cast her in. But what if he was outside somewhere? What if he saw her light come on? Nausea and goosebumps evoked by a near stranger. A near stranger who'd conjured up a narrative centered around her and him, a narrative which he seemed to believe despite its non-reciprocity. Limerence, it wasn't flattering but degrading, reductive, dehumanizing. He'd poured into her all his expectations, as though she were a container, A heart-shaped cake pan. Mathieu pulled at the doorknob, but it caught in its frame. Locked. If he could just speak to her in person. Cold, it was. Wind climbing up his spine and caressing his neck. He sat on the curb, shoulders hunched, watched a group of drunken girls trip over themselves, squeal, their heels clinking like ghost stones. One stumbled across the road, and past him, jangling keys, metal scratching against the keyhole, creaking door. His dirty shoe, a door jammed just in time. Then, he followed her in and sat in the stairwell outside Nora's door. Rehearsed his lines in his head. Then aloud. Knock, knock. If he could just speak to her in person. Knock, knock. Knock, knock. They say every tragedy begins with someone laughing. That's how I open my statement. The detective gives me a look that lies somewhere between pity and paperwork. The room smells of burnt coffee, old carpet, and that faint metallic aftertaste you get when blood tries to pass as disinfectant. Amber light hums through the blinds. Dust hangs in the air like applause that forgot to stop. Relax, he says. You're not the one on trial. I give him a short customer service chuckle. You'd be surprised how often I hear that. He presses record. The red light blinks, a tiny accusation. Before the clubs and the crowds, there was a house where we never cried. Mom said tears made ghosts jealous. So we laughed, at funerals, at breakups, at bills we couldn't pay. I was 5 when my father slipped on black ice. Mom stood over him and laughed so hard her voice cracked like the pavement under his head. That sound stitched something in me, a thread that never stopped vibrating. I learned early that laughter is cheaper than grief. It started, I tell him, with a chuckle. The club was called the Giggle Chamber. Bad omen but a decent bar. Neon sputtered outside, casting red and blue across faces that wanted to forget their day jobs. Inside, the walls were painted black, but you could still see the water stains underneath, like old bruises showing through makeup. The mic smelt of nerves and mint gum. That first night, someone cracked a joke about penguins or politicians, the usual sort. The crowd laughed in unison, people-pleaser kind of laughter that says, "We're fine, honestly." Watched from the bar, nursing a warm beer. When the comedian left the stage the applause died. But the laughter didn't. It stayed in the room like smoke after a fire. Soft at first, barely there. The bartender wiped down glasses and hummed along to it, thought it was the speakers. The manager checked the sound system twice. But I heard it clearly, underneath everything, a chuckle that didn't belong to anyone. I walked to the stage. Empty now, just the microphone stand and a stool with a wobbly leg. The laughter seemed to come from the floorboards, or maybe the walls. I touched the mic. It was warm. Behind the bar hung a yellowing poster from an old comedy tour. In small print, "Fear and farce share a punchline." I used to think it was clever marketing. Now I think it was a warning. The detective tilts his pen. You're saying laughter spread? I'm saying it evolved. A week later, I was back on stage, different crowd, same hunger for distraction. I told a story about my mother, about black ice and cracked voices. They laughed nervously at first, unsure if it was allowed. Then harder and then, too hard. A woman in the third row couldn't stop. Her friends patted her back, handed her water. She doubled over, gasping between convulsions. The laughter twisted into something else, something wet. She slid off her chair. Security carried her out still giggling, tears streaming down her face. The rest of the audience watched, frozen. Then someone in the back started laughing. Then another. Within seconds, the whole room was howling, not at my joke but at her. I stood on stage and felt it, that hum beneath the sound. The nervous laugh. It smelt of static and perfume testers, panic-dressed in polite clothes. A man keeled over mid-chuckle at the 6 o'clock news 2 days later. His chest still jolted when the paramedics zipped the bag. I smiled along when I saw it online. You have too. Silence gets you noticed. Didn't that strike you as odd? The detective asks. Everything's normal if it's popular. Then came the contagious laugh. It traveled quicker than rumor. People caught it on buses, in lifts, during moments of silence. So seemly, a stranger's grin could expand your lungs. The media, unusually in agreement, called it the joy plague. Couples who hadn't spoken in months started wheezing together. Some posted pics in panic, hashtag for better for worse, then waited for likes that never came, while the chuckles kept going. Teachers collapsed mid-lesson. Students smirked in the surprising silence. A funeral went viral when the priest slipped on wet grass. The mourners clapped for 5 straight minutes. The mayor live-streamed herself laughing for 6, when she finally gasped, "Please stop recording." No one did. The detective folds his arms. And you? Did you catch it? I was born with it. He frowns. What kind? The quiet one. The sort that looks like control. The one grief wears to work. He hesitates. The tape hums. I call it the silent laugh. It sounds like relief, feels like drowning. It's what happens when a scream learns manners. I lean back in my chair. For the first time since we started, my hands are shaking. I press them flat against the table but they won't stop. There's a moment right after the laughter dies when your body forgets who it belongs to. Your lungs still remember the rhythm. Your heart doesn't? That's where I live, in that pause. The detective watches my hands. I pull them back into my lap. He says nothing. Good, silence is the only honest audience. He slides photographs across the table. Mouths open mid-laugh, eyes all wrong. Recognize anyone? I point. That's the chuckle. Blue jacket. That's the nervous one, see her hands? And then, that's the contagious one. Center frame. We ran facial recognition, he says. There's only one person in every photo. I smile, but it takes effort this time. You don't say. You were on stage. I was. So were they. He closes the folder. 48 dead. 48 set free. That's not funny. Neither was their laughter. A twitch flickers at his mouth. A single chuckle escapes. The mirror breathes back the sound, stretching it. He touches his throat, a touch too late. You shouldn't laugh in small rooms, I whisper. They say the tape corrupted there. The laughter distorted into something liquid and underneath was a whisper, help me. The report calls it mass psychogenic illness. TikTok calls me the laughing man of Block M. I call it feedback. The viral kind. They moved me to isolation, where guards wear headphones that play rain. Doctors hum children's songs as they walk the corridor, and yet, still, their shoulders shake. They always pretend it's a cough. You want truth? They were all mine. Every single one. The chuckle opened the door. The nervous filled the cracks. The contagious made sure everyone heard. The silent waited underneath them all. It wasn't joy. It was need, a plea for someone to listen to grief without remixing it as comedy. Behind my eyes, scenes replay in wandering visions, moonlit confession rooms, shifting walls, shows that never end but change sets each episode. You'd like them, detective. They're darkly funny. They send a new interrogator, young, fresh, the sort who still believes empathy is sterile. He brings tea he won't drink. Do you feel remorse? Of course. Every time someone laughs, I hear it. He stops the recorder. Then what do you want? I lean close enough for my breath to fog the glass. To hear silence again. He half laughs, a reflex, a habit, then catches himself and leaves. The light flickers amber, then white, while dust floats like ghosts taking their unwelcome bows. I open my mouth but no sound comes. Some laughs are better left unheard. The footage ends there. The side laugh, They built a storage loft above the interview room years later. Boxes of unsolved cases stacked beneath the same flickering light. Sometimes the guards swear they hear laughter from up there, soft, almost polite, like someone trying not to interrupt. They checked once, found nothing but dust and the faint smell of burnt coffee. Still, no one stores anything there now. They call it the loft room. Not a laughing matter, really. Unless you know the joke. Ever since the divorce, Alain found himself avoiding mirrors. It wasn't a conscious decision at first. Except for the bathrooms, his house had become barren of them. Sylvia had taken the large cheval mirror that had sat quietly in the corner of the bedroom, the sole spectator of a marriage doomed from the start. Once it had followed Sylvia to her new bungalow across town, Alain's reflection could typically only be found above the sink while he brushed his teeth or washed his hands, a sight that he could easily avoid by occupying his attention elsewhere. If he were honest, the time that he was most likely to see his own reflection was in the black, sheer screen of his phone after it had died and powered off, the battery neglected after hours of mindless scrolling while on the couch. And even then, Alain shifted his sight elsewhere, typically taking this as a sign to move from the Chesterfield to his bed for the evening. But as the months dragged, Alain began actively avoiding his own reflection. Every insecurity he had about his own body, his own self, seemed all the more pronounced now, these flaws now the only features he could focus on. His hairline, his degrading posture, the bags under his eyes. He knew in the back of his mind that he was playing up these qualities, that the way he saw himself wasn't an accurate portrayal of how the rest of the world did, but that did little to stop him from fixating on his large pores, his graying complexion, and tired creases. After a while, his reflection became an unwelcome guest in the house, one that he avoided at all costs. Looking back, Alain couldn't remember the first day it happened. He worked from home, balancing Excel files for people he never and will never meet face to face, and the days had begun to blend even before Sylvia and his split. Had been pacing outside his office, an activity he had once claimed helped him focus and brainstorm, but now seemed more aimless. His bathroom door across the hall was open, the sink directly across from him as he marched. His gaze remained on his feet and the floor in front of him, nothing in his peripheral other than the bathroom whenever he turned to pace in the opposite direction. And it was in that peripheral that he caught a glimpse of something. The mirror above the sink took up the entire alcove of the wall, a flat, slightly smudged rectangle of glass. The undefined silhouette of his figure was unmistakable in the corner of his eye, matching his shuffling up and down the hallway. But on the edge of his vision, he spotted something new, a shadow in the reflection that he had never noticed in his years of pacing. He halted his march and looked at the mirror, but was met only with the dour look of a man counting down the hours, no shadow where he could have sworn his peripheral had sensed. He knew he was tired, well, maybe not tired, exhausted may be the better word. He was sleeping more than he had ever done in his life, really. And even when he was up and working, his day never took him beyond his office chair, couch, or hall, where he paced. But despite the lack of physical exertion in his day, he was never able to shake the feeling of being spent, both physically and emotionally. For these reasons, the shadow in his mirror was easy to brush away, even after it persisted for weeks, a consistent smudge out of the corner of his eye that vanished whenever he tried to fixate on the reflection. It was only after a particularly troubling day at work filled with unanswered emails and technical hiccups that he noticed a change in the mirror. The shadow that had once vanished from view whenever he focused on it remained, even after he looked up to focus on the reflection. And it was that Tuesday, at 2:43 p.m., that Alain first laid eyes on the glad man in the mirror. The man stood in the space the shadow once occupied, right on the border of the mirror's glass, partially out of frame. His figure reached the top of the mirror, towering over Alain's reflection. He had a baggy coat that reached past the bottom of the mirror, water dripping down the material as if he had just come in from the rain. He was lit harshly, a bright light accentuating the shadows and creases on his clothes and face, as if illuminated by a bright flash that did not affect anything else in the room. And on the half of his face that was visible, a broad smile sat painted, almost mockingly gleeful. As Alain stared unmoving at this glad man in the mirror, the man gazed back with bright, orange-tinted eyes. Alain waited for his adrenaline to kick in. For the lurch from deep in his chest to activate, firing every neuron in his body with a single, focused command, run. But instead, Alain felt fixated. The man stood unmoving, just half his body visible in the mirror, as if he was standing off-center of the sink, staring forward. But of course, there was no one else in the house, just Alain, his reflection, and the glad-looking man. Alain studied the man's face, frozen and unblinking. Despite the cruel look on his too wide smile, there was a familiarity to his face that Alain couldn't shake. As if the man's cruel smile had knowledge about something within Alain that he was keeping to himself, a secret shared by only the two men. And then Alain blinked, and the man was gone, Alain's wide-eyed reflection the sole figure remaining in the mirror. This ritual continued for weeks. Sometimes the glad man would appear just for a moment in the reflection, sometimes he would disappear for days. Other times he would be center of the reflection, looming behind Alain, who could swear he could almost feel breath on his neck. After a while, it wasn't only the bathroom mirror where Alain could find the man. Any reflection in the house where Alain might catch his own image was joined by the towering, smiling man. But that panic that Alain had expected never did arrive. Instead, the glad man brought out a sense of morbid curiosity within Alain. Whenever he appeared, Alain found himself locked into a staring contest with a figure who never blinked, never moved a muscle, only watched, his wide smile dotted by two ridiculing orange eyes. And that twinging sense of familiarity never left either. Alain would stare at the glad man in the mirror, trying to grasp where he had seen the figure, his face warped in just such a way to remove any relation to a recognizable face. The expression on the man's face never changed, a deriding sense of superiority, like the man's happiness was at the expense of Alain's, and he was proud of this fact. Even when Alain wasn't looking in the mirror, he still found his thoughts drawn back to the glad man. He would sit at his computer in his empty-feeling home, the exhaustion of years of a dying marriage that culminated in an emotionally draining divorce weighing on him like a thick cloud, each breath he took drawing more of it into his lungs. And he would think of the man in the mirror, knowing he was there without having to look. What did he have to be so happy about? Over time, every moment of melancholy Alain found himself slumping into felt like a personal victory for the glad man, like he was giving the man in the mirror exactly what he wanted. But, after a few months of consistent visits by the glad man, a strange feeling began to bubble. Alain never considered himself a petty man, nor someone who was ruled by his emotions. But whenever he found himself giving in to the exhaustion, allowing him the time to wallow in his situation, a new emotion began to rise to the surface. Contempt. The man in the mirror was enjoying this dance, Alain indulging in self-pity while the glad man stood triumphant and ecstatic, and a spark began to burn in Alain's stomach. Therapy, meds, mindful exercises? Had tried all of these to attempt to reignite some of the fire he once had in him, with no success. But now, with this giant, mocking man grinning at him every time he looked in the mirror, Alain wasn't sure if he could consider this feeling motivation, but it was enough to ignite the smallest of changes. And so, Alain started to take action. Slowly at first, finding moments where he would allow himself to slink into his couch for hours, and instead leaping up to his feet. Just standing at first, not accomplishing anything, sometimes for almost half an hour, but it still felt like a small victory. A tiny win against the glad man in the mirror. Before long, Alain found himself going outside again. No major exercise, just walks. Anything to stop him from slumping down and having the day wash past him. Movement became his go-to weapon against the glad man, while he wouldn't say his mood was improving. That petty contempt he felt in the pit of his stomach for the man in the mirror kept him active, kept him productive when every part of his body was telling him to lie down for hours. And that could be considered progress, right? The man in the mirror remained present throughout the weeks, his smile wide despite his wet clothes, but Alain didn't care. He even found himself flipping off the mirror more often than not. And the times when Alain found himself staring at the man, his glowing orange eyes locking Alain in a trance, he would snap himself out and hurry to clean a portion of the house. Alain wasn't even striving for happiness anymore. If he was going to improve his life entirely out of spite, so be it. No one ever said self-improvement needed to come from a place of hopefulness. If he needed to live the rest of his life fueled by energetic bursts of scorn, then so be it. And it was during one of these motivated rushes of energy, an energetic sweep of the kitchen to stave off a 2 o'clock nap, that he noticed the photograph under the fridge. Its edge poked out right below the bottom of the appliance, knocked loose by the broom as Alain cleaned. He looked down at the visible corner of the photo, recognizing it as one that used to hang on the front of the fridge. The sheet must have been knocked loose while Sylvia was moving out, drifting under the fridge and out of sight. Alain swept at the photo an additional time to free it, bending down for a closer look. He couldn't recall the exact occasion the photo displayed. Maybe it was a night of celebration, maybe just a Tuesday night with friends, no reason needed other than to enjoy each other's company. But displayed was a group of friends, Sylvia as well, posed in front of a glowing neon sign that lit them all from behind in fluorescent pink lighting. The only detail that Alain remembered from the night was the rain, and how much the group enjoyed themselves despite the weather. Because there in the photo Alain stood, grinning from ear to ear in genuine happiness, water dripping from his jacket, his eyes gleaming a faint orange hue from the photographer's camera flash. What did he have to be so happy about? Had life truly been that much better than it is now? Undoubtedly, he was in a different stage in life, the complications of an adult life replacing the youthful optimism that the Alain in the photo displayed. But in spite of everything the past year threw at him, deep down that young Alain was still buried in him somewhere. He might be starting from a different kind of zero, but the possibility of returning to that joyful optimism hadn't yet been fully extinguished. Despite the upsets, the rocky times and what felt like a year wasted in miasma, the Alain in the kitchen was still the same Alain as in the photo. That smiling, glad Alain. Alain shifted his gaze from the photo to the front of the fridge, his reflection shining in the aluminum steel. There was only one figure in the reflection now. The beginnings of a faint, glad expression growing across his face. You know the rules. Mother shouts, raising her voice above the last two stanzas of the screeching song. Lila's narrow shoulders curve into retreat from the crescendo of voices. You really didn't have to. A meek smile creeps onto full lips. Elegant fingers, the color of mother's coffee before milk, brush a curtain of thickly coiled hair behind pierced ears. Mother places a weathered alabaster white hand on Lila's shoulder. Go on, love. Mother motions to the modest single-layer Betty Crocker cake, an 18 the shape of golden balloons sitting atop it. I watch Lila close her eyes and knit her brows. The creaky house becomes eerily still, holding its breath in an attempt to bring Lila's wish into existence on the melting vanilla icing. Next to me, Kiki, one of the triplets, rolls her eyes and barks, hurry up and make a wish, Lila. I'm hungry. Kita and Kimmy whirl and simultaneously smack Kiki's arm. You just wish it was your 18th birthday so you could get your special cake. The three fell into the steady pattern of all birthday celebrations, begging Mother to let them have a taste. Maybe just this once, I thought. Now. You know the rules, Mother croons, brushing back the triplets' ramshackle hair to perfection. Multiple voices chirp, reciting the words Mother taught all of us when we arrived. Rule number 2, the day we can venture out into the world is when we can celebrate with something special, cake. How could Mother do it for every birthday? Especially with the baby that showed up at our doorstep last night. I wasn't a baby when I got to Mother's, but I was left at the doorstep, too. At first, all you can do is cry. Searing, hot tears for weeks, months. An ache in your chest that doesn't go away, like your ribcage is made of plexiglass, taking each inhale with no real air to supplement the gasping screams. The question that ping-pongs in your brain all day long, urging you to continue purging the memories of your previous family. Why wasn't I enough? Then, you slowly forget, that soft white sensation creeping in as if your head is floating. And Mother is there, with open arms. She's brought in over 30 sisters into this house. She was the only one who thought we were worthy when everyone else tossed us to the side. Weathered, soft, alabaster white floating through you. Like the clouds lazily hanging from the thick beams in our shared bedrooms. and glow-in-the-dark stars shielding us from the hazy figures in the corners, watching us sleep. Lila's leaving today, on her way to begin a new life. How many of my older sisters have left and never come back to see how we were all doing? How Mother is doing? An itch of bitterness creeps down my throat. I would miss Lila the most. She taught me how to braid my hair, pierced my ears when Mother wasn't looking, and even told me she kissed a boy when we weren't supposed to go past the iron gate. I shake my head, attempting to recenter my reality from the cloudy memories. A jerky movement from the corner of my eye snaps my mind to attention. A straw hat covering sparse gray hairs and ripped jean overalls appear in front of the sprawling patches of narcissus and red poppies. I let out a soft sigh, just Gardner William. The gentle ebb and flow of Mother's perfect flowers mirrors a dreamy sunrise from the casement windows, years of William perfecting his green thumb on grand display. He turns to the large windows and smiles, waving to me. This was a daily occurrence ever since I came to live here. I love helping Gardner William. He often calls me his little green thumb. He's the closest thing to a father I have. He taught all of us how to ride a bike, tie our shoes, and catch lightning bugs. Mother even has him eat supper with us every night. In a blinding flash, William's shears clumsily miss a wilting stem, deep red pooling in his hand and forearm, trickling down. William's head oddly cracks to the left, too far to the left. My desk scrapes against the floor as a full-body gasp escapes my lips, and 11 heads swivel in my direction. Shit. Nicolette, Mother mutters, what is rule number 3? Her heels hiss against the wood floor as she pivots, setting the Bible onto the ornately sculpted desk. Piercing blue eyes pin me to my seat, and my heart lodges in my throat. When Mother is teaching, we are listening. I avoid her icy gaze. Every time a sister leaves, Mother becomes easily irritable. When Diana left 2 years ago, she forced all of us to balance books on our heads for 3 straight hours because Olivia forgot to put away the eggs. Rule number 5, one sister's chore is everyone's responsibility. No breaks. No water. Only Mother's lesson. Beads of sweat from the cold glass dripped onto her puckered skin. The crash of several books echoed throughout the halls. These are the rules, her voice soft and sweet. One sister sniffled, rebalancing the 3 books onto her aching crown. No child of mine will forget them. She nods curtly. Please go to your room and grab your blackboard and Bible. I know you did not bring it down to lessons today. She taps her glasses away from the tip of her nose, and eyes the stairs. I gulp down a sigh of relief and twist to lift off from the stiff chair, and on your way back her voice booms, you must recite Ephesians verse 5 and 6 from memory. It felt as if eyes from every part of the room were boring into me, my legs melting into the floor. Mother only wants what is best, she knows I can do better. I bow softly. As you wish, Mother. I take the stairs by twos, attempting to quicken my pace. Our shared rooms come into view from the top of the steps. Which verse use thy versus thee? A cloud of white fogs my memory. I hear the click of a lock, metal grinding, and a soft rasp of old hinges. I slowly turn to the sound, an old, heavy door slightly ajar. A stained glass lamp peeking through the crack, shining bright as if someone was seated there moments ago. Rule number 1, do not go into Mother's office. I shake my head in protest. No, you've caused enough trouble today. You know how Mother gets when she loses a daughter. Another voice screams in my head, the ping-ponging starting up again. What will she do if my head begins to hurt? The words fade away. Were they even there? Soft reverberations of Mother's lessons spiral up, and I quickly scan the hall for hidden sisters, then slide my small frame through the crack of the office door. An oval green rug sits beneath the delicately carved desk, with angels and beasts carved into every inch. 4 bookshelves loom behind it, holding leather-backed textbooks, locked boxes and binders thick with documents. I make my feet as light as possible, tiptoeing to the brightly lit desk, scanning to find any potential letters from our sisters. Just boring newspapers, and I cock my head, attempting to gain a better view below the desk. Stray papers catch the lamp light, titles regarding goods and services, price ranges, hair color, receipts and invoices with sisters' names. Maybe mother is in need of additional money to support us. I wonder if we can help her? Why does she not tell us? A nagging voice rings like a bell in the back of my mind. I remember mother taught a few lessons on our government, social security, foster care systems, capitalistic governments, stocks, the brown market. I definitely zoned out during this lesson. Mother acted as if poison was on her tongue when she discussed the topic with us. We never talked about it again. A bitter cold strikes the back of my neck, as if the world was dunked into an ice bath. A streak of black shoots through my peripheral vision and into the corner of the office. Long streaks of inky hair whisper around the figure. I choke back a scream, stumbling backwards, digging my nails into my palms. The ghostly figure seems to waver, bleeding into the corner of the room as if it were a painting. A long tendril rises at the shoulder, a finger-like talon points towards the office door. A skull key. Creaks of the stairs blast upwards, heels smacking onto the splintering wood. I jump, leaping towards the door and swipe the heavy key. I turn quickly to see if the wavering haze was indeed a painting, angling myself to escape the frigid room. But it was gone. I can't sleep. A windstorm began brewing at dinner time, creaks and moans of 100-year-old crevices reverberating endlessly into the night. The cold sting of the skull key presses into my breast like a brand, forcing my eyes open, frequently darting to the corner where the hazy figures reside. Tonight, it seems as if they are waiting for something. Potentially agitated with the windstorm's never-ending banter with the shingles, or that I now held something they guided me to. A tiny sliver of moonlight broke through the window, tree branches creating malformed faces and figures through the vast window, and I raised the skull key to meet it. D. H. My heart skips a beat. D. H? Mother never told us of a sister named D. H, or was this the old owner of the house? Curiosity grumbles in my gut. All of the sisters knew every room, what was in them, and what went where, and to return what you take. That was another one of Mother's rules, number 4 to be exact. The only additional room I can think of is the shed outside for additional supplies and some gardening tools for William. It's most likely just a name, Nicolette. Get back to bed. Mother knows best. A twinge twists my gut. On instinct I look up. 2 figures stand before me, hazy and see-through. Their heads lie at an odd angle, too sharp to the left, just like Gardener William. This time I am not afraid as they lead me to the door. I softly plume onto the carpet beneath our bunk and tiptoe, placing my heels carefully onto the pieces of wood that won't creak. I have Lila to thank for that. I slide down the hall eyeing Mother's room as I pass, and drift down the stairs like the wraiths in front of me. They abruptly stop, turning their angled necks to me and point. Linens. There was a door at the back of the closet. The wraiths hover behind me, a bone-deep pressure building in my chest, a tight squeeze beginning to sharpen against my throat. My mind feels as if it is breaking, like air is being sucked out of the tight room. What about the rules? What will Mother make my sisters do if she finds me? Another voice grinds out, as if bone was fluttering in the back of one's mouth, crunching every word into my ears. Why do we never call? Mother loves us. Why do we never come back? Mother loves us. A gentle brush against my elbow snaps me into reality, pushing my arm forward, gliding the key into the lock and twisting. Metal, cold metal spreads across my slick fingertips. A room, just like our living room, is replicated in this cold space. A lamp is on, the same lamp, in the same place as our living room. The chairs are the same. The carpets are the same. Mother's ornate desk is the same. There's a sort of muscle memory at play, since the rest of the room is still coated in the hue of the night. I step into the room and the floorboards creak. In the corner of my eye I see a shadow, sitting on the love seat angled towards the bookshelf. Before they can move I lie flat onto the ground behind the large leather sofa. It's Mother, this is just like her office. Her place to relax. Just stand up and apologize. But the figure does not move. The floors do not creak. The release of the leather on skin does not pierce the sickly quiet air. I removed myself from the floor and cautiously moved to the lamp. Still no movement, not even an inch. This shadow, it seems so familiar. I curl my fingers against the lamp and turn it towards the figure, slowly revealing the brown thick curls and pierced ears I saw only 2 days ago. A bright toothy grin is stretched into a smile, reaching high up on her cheeks and squinting her beautiful eyes almost shut. Her elbows are flexed into 90-degree angles, floating above the rolled sofa arm, neck tilted slightly to the left. A large necklace covering a blooming bruise around her throat. El Lila? My voice comes out in a squeak. I move closer, reaching out to touch her. Her nail beds are blue, but she feels warm. I look down to the carpet, attempting to examine her feet, but she's barefoot, with a tag wrapped around her big toe. A price tag. I take in air in massive gulps. The white fog begins to clear. The night Lila left, I remember. She told me to be careful. She told me to run. So, I run. The lamp thuds onto the floor and I bolt past the doorway into the sprawling garden. The deep hues of sunrise begin to blot the sky. My head whips. Go! The crackles of the tree branches and red poppies seem to scream at me as my bare feet dig into the earth, kicking up the soft morning dew. Gardener William leaves the pearly white shed with a pail of fresh soil in hand, already beginning his day, and locks eyes with me. My heart sings, his arms open wide and I crash into him, tears streaking my face. Mother. I croak, she keeps them. I pant, looking frantically between his bloodshot eyes. I hear soft shushes from his lips, caressing my hair with his weathered hands. She stuffs them and sells them, I whisper, scream, looking around to ensure I haven't been found, like dolls. I tug his arm towards the gate, snot rolling down my nose, sputtering the last words out like a prayer. You have to help us leave, you have to help my sisters escape. Gardener William cocks his head, looking into my eyes, and flashes a toothy grin. One that reached past his cheekbones. You know the rules. There is always something strange about interrogation rooms. The wooden table that reminds you of the cafeteria at primary school. The cold, metal chair which has housed many horrible people. The scratchy, sandpaper felt blanket. The soft buzzing of the lights above us. The room temperature plastic water bottle they give victims as a courtesy. Amara's shoulder stings under the new bandage they wrapped around her bicep. She runs her fingers through her long, newly brushed hair as the endless sound of pencil scribbling on paper fills the silent room. Amara lifts the water bottle up to her mouth and takes a big gulp, swallowing it with visible difficulty. So, then he attacked you with the glass cup, and what happened next? Detective Leone asks softly, leaning back in his chair opposite of Amara with his notebook sitting in his lap, pencil in hand. His forehead crinkles in quiet focus. Amara sniffs through her nose and picks at the plastic label wrapping around half-empty water bottle. I fell to the ground, he got on top of me and hit me. Right here, she points to the left side of her face where a bright bruise is showing, and I just kicked him in the stomach, and I rolled away, but as I was getting up, he grabbed my leg and I fell against the lamp. I'm sorry, I don't really remember. Amara adjusts awkwardly in her seat, sounding ashamed and embarrassed. Detective Leone is writing in his notebook when Amara glances up at him. He's nodding his head slowly, humming every so often so Amara knows he's listening. And then, what happened? The older uniformed man asks, scratching his salt and pepper beard, finally looking up and waiting for Amara. Amara looks back down at the water bottle label and chips away at the sticky part on the inside. Her blonde hair falls off one shoulder, but she doesn't care to move it away. Her shoulders are hunched forward and her hands tightly grasped around the plastic water bottle, so much so that it creaks when she speaks. And then, I ran to the kitchen, and he caught up with me, and Amara goes quiet and still. Her breathing becomes deeper and her shoulders shudder slightly. And? Is that when you stabbed Mr. Sadat? Detective Leone speaks softly to Amara, waiting for her to finish the story. Amara lets a few tears fall from her face as she nods. Yes, I did. I was so scared. He was just screaming and screaming. I'm sure the neighbors heard the commotion. Am I going to jail? Her words are quiet and shaky. Amara begins to cry, her shoulders shaking as tears fall down her chin. Detective Leone sighs and sets his notebook on top of the wooden table with a soft slap. I can neither confirm or deny that, but off the record? He leans forward in his chair and whispers in a comforting, deep voice. No, you are going to be on your way home within hours. Leone then stands from his chair, grabbing his notebook and tucking the metal chair nicely into place against the table. I will see you soon, Ms. Miller. Do you need anything? A jacket? More water? Perhaps an apple or something? Amara looks up at him and wipes her tears, clearing her throat before answering, no, thank you though. She offers him a polite smile. He returns it. Then he leaves, and Amara returns to her quiet state. Amara glances around the small room, recounting the cracks on the wall, outlining her pointer finger on the scars that cover the wooden table. What a night. Amara closes her eyes and takes a deep breath, holding it in her lungs before releasing it into the cool air. When she opens her eyes a moment later, she once again finds the security camera in the corner of the room, pointed straight at her. The tiny blinking red light reminds her to play nice. She's being watched. Tearing her eyes away from the camera, Amara settles onto the small clock hanging on the wall, waiting. Finally, after an hour, Detective Leone opens the door with a soft smile. Okay kiddo, you're free to go. Amara smiles with recurring tears in her eyelids. Oh thank you. Amara stands up and follows Leone out into the hallway and up to a counter, braced with a large glass wall on top of it. You got the items I asked for? Detective Leone speaks to an elderly woman on the other side. She nods and pushes up her glasses, squinting her eyes as she reads a label on a large plastic bag. 143? She tilts her head down, glancing between Amara and Leone above the rim of her glasses, looking for some kind of confirmation. Leone nods. Yup, that's it. He grabs the bag from the little hole in the glass before handing it to Amara. She grabs the Ziploc and opens the tab. Oh, my things. Thank you, Detective. Amara grabs her iPhone, pressing the power button only to find it's dead. Her fingers feel several small bumps on the back of the case. Amara slowly turns her phone in her hand and sees a few drops of dried blood on the back of the phone case. Amara swallows heavily. He looks at her with a stoic expression, a sliver of pity shining through. He nods once. Let me show you out. Leone gestures to a larger hallway which leads to the entrance of the building. You don't know anything, Ryan. Amara seethed at her boyfriend as she inhaled her cigarette, leaning the back of her head against the hollowed-out window in the wall. She blows the smoke out to the half-opened window of their second-story apartment. Ryan keeps his distance away from the window. I know what you did. You killed them. I found your little murderous keepsake box. He threw down a black, cardboard Converse shoe box onto the ground and what came out spilling was anything but surprising. Amara carelessly glances down but her eyes narrow at the shoe box and the ingredients that are now sprawled on the wooden floor. There is a pair of thin, black glasses with cracked frames and a few tiny spews of deep red droplets on them. Threading out of the box like a snake is a bright, multicolored scarf, which is drenched and stiff with dried blood. One end of the scarf is ripped and frayed, as if someone was tugging on it harshly. The items that slid furthest away are 3 pairs of phones. 2 iPhones and 1 Android. All broken and a jumbled mess of electronic wires and boxes. She raises her eyes to meet Ryan's eyes. Lifting the cigarette up to her lips, she inhales and holds the burn in her lungs. Fine. Amara tilts her head down to the box and lifts her free hand to her face. She makes a soft kissing sound against her palm before flattening her hand and pursing her lips, blowing the smoke directed at the items. I did kill Toby, he was an okay boyfriend. And I killed his friend, and his girlfriend, they were wastes of space. So what? Amara keeps calm and organized, unlike Ryan who keeps taking minor steps back from her. You got skeletons in your closet. And I have more than enough proof to take to the police. He smirks. Like he defeated this large secret. Amara stays still. Not frozen but still. Like her code is buffering. Amara takes a deep breath through her nose before tossing the butt of the cigarette out the cracked window and walks to the kitchen. She opens up a cupboard, grabs a glass cup from the inside and leaves the cupboard ajar. Amara walks into the living room and finds her place a few paces in front of Ryan. What are you? Ryan begins but flinches backwards and raises his hands near his face. Jesus, Amara. Amara smashes the glass against her left bicep. She gasps in pain but keeps some of the shards and tosses them on the ground. As Ryan stays in his self-protective stance, frozen in fear and confusion, Amara takes this as a chance to rush at him. She tackles him to the ground and she scratches and tears at his arms and face, before beginning to scream, "Help! Someone help me!" Ryan balls up his fist and strikes Amara on the side of her face, knocking her off of him and into the tall, standing lamp, knocking it over with a crash. In the distance, you can hear the imminent sound of police sirens nearing. Ryan gets up, running out of the living room and into the connected kitchen. Lurching around the small, rectangular island, he reaches for the large kitchen knife but a bleeding manicured hand reaches for it instead and unleashes it from the kitchen block, pointing it at Ryan. Amara's straight, blonde hair is now overflowing with stray hairs. Her face is red and wild, her collarbone has a paper-thin cut from the glass shattering. Her shirt all bundled, her left shoulder has soft streams of blood leaking down her arm, leaving a trail of blood in her wake. Amara laughs loudly. You think you're a smart boy? Huh? Little Miss Nancy Drew? Look at you, figuring out the puzzle that your girlfriend is a serial killer. She keeps the newly sharpened knife pointed at him, tightly gripping the wooden handle. Ryan's eyes are wide, his hands are shaky with fear as he raises them near his shoulders. Amara, don't be stupid, the police are minutes away, don't you hear the sirens? That's your reign, coming to an end. Amara scoffs, then screams again, no. Ryan, get off. Help! Help! Amara grabs a vase off the counter and slams it on the ground, stepping forward and grabbing a tin bowl, throwing that against the wall. The flashing red and blue lights now illuminate the second-floor apartment. Ryan shouts at Amara and turns to the door, hearing the police cars right downstairs. But Ryan collapses to the ground with a deep, guttural scream, clutching his right side which is gushing with blood, staining his clothes and seeping into the cracks of the hardwood floor. He rolls onto his back and stares at Amara with tears streaming down the side of his face. She stands there with a wide stance, dripping knife in hand, and a dark smile. The police lights shine on the right side of Amara's face and the tunnel of light shining from the toppled-over lamp on the left side. The look in her eyes is manic. Ryan gasps in pain, you aren't getting away with this, they'll catch you. The police are here. Amara pouts her bottom lip in faux worry, oh you little boy, don't you see? I didn't kill anybody. You did. She smiles before snapping her head up to the front door, the police banging on the wood, shaking the apartment. Help! Please, my boyfriend. He's crazy. Amara screams and begins to cry. She drops the knife on the ground, you were a good boyfriend, pity you had to dig up the past. She whispers, glancing one more last time at Ryan. Amara bolts to the door, flinging it open and collapses into an officer's arms, wailing and sobbing. Other officers rush into the apartment and take over the apartment scene. Ryan lays on the floor, trying to speak and reach out as the police find him, but the only thing that comes up is a gurgled mix of saliva and blood. It trails down his cheek as an officer with a first aid kit rushes over to assist. Ryan rolls his head to the side and watches as the police find evidence of the night. The broken glass, the lamp, the knife, the shoebox of Amara's prior incidents. Ryan's eyes fold close, the rush and urgency of voices fade into a loud ringing in his ears until the only thing seeping through the ringing is Amara's loud cries, he is a stalker. He killed my ex and my friends. I confronted him and he went crazy. The murmurs of a female officer quiets Amara's thunderous sound down. However, On the stained floor, Ryan's world quiets down. As Amara is led outside to the apartment parking lot, she is given a comforted blanket, a plastic water bottle, and a medic to bandage her shoulder. She sips her water in the back of a police car, letting her feet hang off the side and head resting on the open door frame. Amara notices the large apartment doors open and watches the white cloth-covered stretcher being loaded into the ambulance. She raises the water to her lips and sips from it to hide her smile. Setting the water in her lap and wrapping the blanket tighter around her shoulders to protect her skin from the cold. That's when Amara sees a tall, older man in a long brown coat and suit, walking towards her and the officer standing next to her. He stops a few feet from Amara and holds out his hand to her. "Hello, miss, I am Detective Leone. Do you mind if we take you down to the station for a few questions?" The hollow sound of the late November wind blew through the wide brick alleyway. Standing around the factories had become quite a depressing pastime for Arla, although she found in it a certain discreet imagination, creativity, memory. As she strolled through the cold wind that wished for summer, she could easily imagine it being hot and dry desert sand blowing against her face, for it was just as bitter. The intermittent torrents of wispier and more liberated streams of sand shut Arla's eyes, and the howling wind that barreled down the alleyway as though it were a wind tunnel made her finally look away. She had recalled this place many times. The alleyway always helped her see it, a desert place in the far reaches of her imagination, or someone else's. The factories that surrounded her transformed into small ruins of concrete. The sickly white calm lake of clouds in the sky dissipated to reveal a huge golden sun high above the horizon. She was marching through the desert. She suddenly felt pangs of mortal fear thudding in her chest. She felt like she was nearly going to faint from dehydration. She saw the ruins getting closer. She was marching toward them. They looked like small rectangular monuments. Their shadows stretched across the desert, elongated by the gradually setting sun. Off to the right was a doorway. It opened up into the sand. What could that be? Against her will, she found herself rising from the ground and being rocketed toward it. She was being held, someone had picked her up and was carrying her. She squirmed. She felt a man's arms, and she could not escape from their grip. The doorway rapidly came closer. It led into pitch darkness. Arla tried to scream but her mouth was muffled. Time began to feel much slower as her mind flipped into fight or flight and she flailed her arms and punched the man wherever she could. All was inevitable. The slow approaching doorway into total darkness was a new memory that would forever haunt Arla. Arla felt a hand rubbing against her shoulder, and she slowly opened her eyes. She saw the large brick mill building on one side of the street and the towering metal factories on the other. A man stared down at her. He had a long gray beard and a faded, dusty face. He wore several tattered coats in layers, some were leather, others denim, others cloth. "Are you all right, you girl?" he said raspily before retreating into a coughing fit. "You been lying here 30 minutes. Arla gasped and sat up, crawling backward into some bags. She looked around and slowly sighed, realizing where she was. "Yeah," she grunted, shaking her head. She then focused her eyes on the man intently, attempting to discern whether or not he was a threat. The man seemed to march in circles as he mumbled, "Ye shouldn't, young teenager bein' out here, see? That's dangerous. For you it is. I saw a woman get robbed 10 months? Years." He chuckled strangely. "You should get out. It's no safe place, you see. Not so many people to help." Arla nodded slowly as she gaped at the man cautiously. She then scrambled to her feet and turned around to see the man's encampment, a small sleeping bag and a pack of beer, and about 5 stuffed bags. She pulled the hood of her gray hoodie over her semi-long black hair and walked off in slight embarrassment, realizing that she must have been intruding in his space when she'd passed out. Arla had experienced the memory of the desert since she was a child, but the man carrying her through the strange doorway was new. She wondered woefully why this was happening to her now as she made her way home across the city of Elizabeth, New Jersey. She made her way from the factories to the river. She walked along the path past the drab city buildings. She began to hurry, as the sun was nearing the horizon in the cloudy sky, and it was getting chilly. She reached her home after about 40 minutes. It was a large, nearly dilapidated house in a small lot with stalky grass. She stepped up to the large porch and opened the creaky screen door before removing her boots as she stepped up the step in front of the main door. She shoved it open, as it often got stuck. She turned left to the kitchen, where some dish with beans and rice was cooking. "Honey, where have you been? You need to take the trash out, and have you been taking your meds?" "Yes, Mama," said Arla sullenly, brushing off her mom's interrogation. Her mom was a tall woman in her 40s who would wear tight dark-colored skirts in an attempt to appear somewhat more affluent than she was. This contrasted with the fact that she sometimes had to sacrifice ingredients when putting food on the table. "TCH. You need some friends, Arla. You gotta stop walking out there on your own. It's not safe." "What's the point in making friends if I'm getting out of here soon? If they accept you. I have good faith in you, Arla, but you should work on your social skills to prepare for college." "I know how to make friends, Mom," Arla muttered, leaving the house with the trash bag. She ate half her dinner and went to bed early, finding herself exhausted from the stress her daydream had brought. The next day, she would go to San Bernardino for an open house at the university there. She had been anxious about the trip, but she was particularly anxious now, as San Bernardino was near a desert. She kept trying to rationalize away any possibility of a connection between where she was going and her dreams. Memories, she called them. She didn't quite know why, but she'd always seen them as memories. Some part of her was determined to believe they had been real once. She eventually managed to force herself to sleep, despite still being somewhat nervous that she would experience the memory again. She dreamed she saw a car on the side of the street by the desert. The car was a Rolls-Royce, and it was parking. She tried to look away from the car, but only saw a blur on either side in her vision. A man in a black suit emerged from the front of the car, and opened the passenger door. He beckoned her in. Something compelled her to obey, and she moved forward, unable to stop herself. She saw only a black void inside the car door as she leaned forward into it. Arla awoke in a sweat. She saw the alarm said it was 3 a.m. and she put her head in her hands and started crying. "I can't take it," she screamed. "I can't take it. Take me away from it." Her mom rushed into the room to see what was the matter, flicking the light on her way in. She comforted Arla as she curled up and cried. At around noon, Arla's plane took off into the clear, sunny sky. She stared out the window at farms organized into rectangles that seemed to repeat forever. Her parents had often not been present when she was a child, as her father was often gone on business meetings. Both of her parents had been quite distant. Then Arla began developing her dissociations. Whenever she gathered enough mental clarity to reflect on them, she would trace them back to one experience, a car accident. She had hit her head, and so could not remember most of it, but apparently, her parents had been driving past those factories. The one memory she had of it was in the aftermath. A strange tall man in a black suit walked by the wreck and had grazed her shoulder with his hand. And ever since, she had experienced these strange dreams. Arla found the dreams were stronger when she was wandering around that place, and she was drawn to it. She would stroll around there at least twice a week after school. When her parents caught her wandering and discovered that was why she was often late returning from school, they got her a psychiatrist who put her on antipsychotic medications. These medications gave her a slew of other symptoms, and only seemed to make it somewhat harder to access her dream memories, but the strange thing was that they also attenuated her memory of normal events. Given that none of these medications worked well, she would often dread taking them and neglected to do it consistently. In part out of a desire to unravel the meaning of her own dreams, Arla aspired to study psychology. California State University San Bernardino was one of several schools she was looking at, but it would possibly be one of the easier ones to enroll in. She sighed as she stared out the window, and eventually dozed off. Arla exited the airport and awaited an Uber that would take her to the university's campus. She stepped out of the airport lobby to see the white sun blazing overhead and the clear sky. She shivered in the hot air. Despite the heat, she was still wearing her gray hoodie. She pulled it over her head. She waited a while outside the airport as cars went by in the curbside lanes. She periodically kept checking her phone. Her Uber appeared to be stuck in traffic. After about 30 minutes of waiting, she looked up from a game she was playing on her phone and gasped with shock. A black Rolls-Royce had pulled up directly in front of her. The front door opened and a tall man in a black suit emerged. He had a gaunt, bony face and sleek, combed-back black hair. He smiled pleasantly at Arla as though he'd been expecting her. She shivered with fear. He stepped over to the passenger door and opened it. He beckoned her over. Her breath rattled with apprehension. She looked back at her Uber app and found that her ride had arrived. She anxiously looked at the driver's description. To her shock, it showed a headshot of the man with the combed-back hair, and the car was listed as a Rolls-Royce. She swore it had previously shown a Mazda driven by a shorter man. She began to think the worst, but went through her breathing exercises, and counted 5 things she could see aside from the man and the car: the sidewalk, people darting to and fro, palm trees lining the streets, the roof hanging over the platform, and the mountains in the distance. She felt the ridges in the metal bench on which she sat, the slight breeze around her, the heat in the air, and her hand on her black jeans. She listened to the sounds around her, people chattering loudly, the engines of cars and the squeaking of bus brakes, and the sound of reggaeton thumping from someone's car speakers. She smelled cigarettes on the air and someone's cologne. She tasted the bubblegum she had been chewing. She looked once again at the man. He was standing patiently with the door still open, and his pleasant smile was frozen in place. She began to consider that perhaps her Uber driver had changed at some point when she hadn't been looking at the app. Nevertheless, she decided to cancel the trip. "I can wait for another one, just to be safe," she thought. After canceling the trip, she stood up and tried to walk away from the strange car. She tried to remain calm, keeping her breathing deep and slow, and focusing on the things she'd identified around her. She found herself staring into the man's eyes. His gaze was somehow too powerful for her to resist, and she found herself hypnotized. She was walking toward the car. She was overcome with fear and dread as the car door came closer to her, and everything she had noticed about her surroundings vanished. The doorway of the car got larger and larger until the tan interior of the car wrapped around her, and she found herself sitting down on the soft leather seat. The door was shut and the car was moving. Her mouth was dry and she found it difficult to speak. For a while, she couldn't bring herself to say anything at all, as she saw towns outside the window give way to plains and eventually, to desert. She stared intently at the tall man in the driver's seat, and finally mustered the courage to speak. Mister, this doesn't look like it's the way to the university." "Why, of course not." The man spoke smoothly. "You canceled the trip." Arla's heart sank. "Oh, okay, yeah, so can you please let me out?" No. He chuckled grimly. "Now we go where I want to go." Arla sat in the tense silence that followed, as the car continued on down a highway. She could see nothing around but desert at this point. "Besides, there's nowhere you could go out here, and no service." The man continued. "No, you'd best stay with me." Arla urgently checked her phone and saw there was indeed no service. She pressed emergency call on her lock screen, and it attempted to dial. To her dismay, a message appeared stating, "No service." Where are you taking me?" she cried out, beginning to panic. "You know where we're going, Arla," the man said calmly. Arla recalled the ruins from her dream. She couldn't believe this was happening, and that she would be stupid enough to get into this car. She leaned against the window and tried breathing deeply, slowly calming her thumping heart. It must be a dream, she thought. By repeating that enough times, she eventually managed to convince herself it was, and she dozed off. To her horror, Arla awoke to find she was still in the car. It had stopped. She looked out the window. The sun was beginning to get low in the sky, and there was still only desert in all directions, save for some distant mountains. The man opened the door. "This is it. Now get out," he ordered sternly. She sat there, frozen in place, and unable to look at him. Soon she found herself being pulled out of the car and carried across the desert. To her dread, she saw the rectangular ruins up ahead. They looked somewhat like the base of a building that had burned down long ago. The sunbeams caused them to cast long shadows on the desert floor, just like in her dream. "No!" she screamed, then found her scream cut short by the dryness in her throat. She kicked and tried to hit the man as he turned slightly, and her eyes widened at what she saw, the doorway in the desert. She felt helpless in the man's strong grip as the doorway came closer, a doorway into a pitch-black void. As it came even closer, she discerned what it was, the entrance to a mine shaft. Slowly, she found herself focusing on the void intently, and the sun around her began to dim. Everything got darker. Darker. Until the doorway finally engulfed her. She fell. She thought she would fall for an eternity, to her death, or to hell, but she landed on her side on solid ground. "I'm gonna be back, real soon. And don't go anywhere. Your power, to see the outcome, I have the power too, you know. I gave it to you." The man shouted down at her. He then dropped something heavy on the ground above. Arla surmised it was some object to block the entrance. She heard the man's feet faintly stomping across the ground and becoming more distant, until she could hear them no more. Her body ached. She groaned in pain. Her voice echoed in a way that suggested narrow, uneven walls surrounded her somewhere. After a while, she heard a faint, raspy voice, a girl's voice. "Looks like you're caught too," the girl said solemnly. "You probably don't even realize, poor thing. But you're going to die now. He stabbed you. I am so sorry, you will never be the same, but I have to do this, now." Arla felt a cold breath on her neck, and then 2 sharp pinpricks. She slipped into unconsciousness. When Arla awoke, she could see. She saw a carved-out tunnel around her with wooden supports along its length. Everything was shaded with a dark blue. She then flinched at the sight of a girl about her own age but unbelievably pale and skinny. The girl wore tattered clothing. "You can see in the dark," the girl informed her. "I'm so sorry. If I hadn't done that, you'd have died. I couldn't let you die, I couldn't. I know I probably should have given you the choice to, but there was no time, and you see. You have the power." Arla was perplexed and terrified. What have you done to my vision? Did you do this?" "Yes. I found ways to keep time. It happened to me about 50 years ago. I do not age, you see. But we need to feed. He lets me feed at night. But he sees whatever I will do, so I cannot escape. But with the 2 of us, there's some chance." Arla was aghast at what she was hearing. She had heard of vampires, but this all felt so strangely different. It felt real. "I'm not dreaming," she asserted. "He's out feeding. He will be preoccupied. Do it now," the girl said. "Dream?" Arla then began to dream, and when she awoke, she looked at the girl. "What did you see?" the girl asked. For the first time in many years, Arla smiled. The girl smiled back. The smell of chlorine burned Edward Cook's nostrils, but the cold dread that crept across his skin was sharper. The university pool should have been empty, it was near midnight, and he had the only key. From inside the women's locker room, he heard muffled splashes, like the steady rhythm of a heartbeat. Something was treading water, waiting. "Filtration," Edward muttered, trying to convince himself. He placed a Windex bottle on his cleaning cart, exchanging it for a rag-wrapped flask of whiskey. He swallowed a gulp, but the shiver that followed wasn't from the burn, it was the security guard's ghost story, suddenly feeling real. Hours earlier, Edward swept a pile of dirt beneath the gymnasium bleachers when footsteps thundered across the empty room. "They finally let you out on your own?" Bill asked, his neatly trimmed white mustache curling into a grin. Edward nodded. He'd just finished a week of custodial training and begged Bill to look the other way about his cleaning shortcut. A lengthy juvenile record turned job hunting into a nightmare for the 25-year-old. Not to mention a slight drug habit and a horrible credit score. Your secret's safe with me, Bill said. It's Linda Rue in the pool you have to watch out for. She the swim coach or something? Edward asked. Nah, our resident ghost. Used to be a lifeguard. I was working the day she drowned. That was, some 20 years ago. Edward's laughter echoed across the gym. How does a lifeguard drown? Undiagnosed heart condition, Bill said, his mustache straightening. Stress and adrenaline can make a deadly mix. So now her angry ghost haunts the pool? Edward said, a thin edge of sarcasm in his voice. She isn't angry. She's patient. She's waiting for something. Edward shook off the story. As he did, the lights in the women's locker room flickered, then steadied. The faint splash that had been echoing from the pool fell silent. A lone drip began nearby, the ping on the tiles reverberated off the walls, and pressed against the edge of his sanity. He raised an eyebrow, then shrugged. Just a power surge, he muttered. And some condensation on the ceiling. Drip. 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 Edward's heart hammered against his ribs. He spun around, certain his eyes were playing tricks. On a hook above a wooden bench, hung a sopping wet towel, something that hadn't been there a minute earlier. Fear paralyzed Edward's body. Only the muscles around his eyes twitched, oscillating like a desk fan as they scanned the room for any rational explanation. A drawn-out, muffled voice drifted from the pool area, sounding as if someone were gargling mouthwash in the morning. Edward. It's time. A note of femininity bled through the murmur, almost warm-hearted, like a mother calling her children for lunch. Though comforting, it was alien, a siren song that wrapped around Edward's nerves. He felt an invisible pull toward the doorway, and the locker room melted away, revealing the dark concrete box that housed the pool. Warm humidity wrapped around him, and the sharp, hollow echo of his footsteps rang out 50 meters down the lane. A dim light reflected off the water's surface, casting a slow, swirling glow onto the concrete wall, like a cosmic lava lamp pulsing in gloom. Hello. Lynn, Edward called out. Only the low hum of pipework and crashing of gentle waves answered back. Aw, I don't have time for ghost stories, he said, throwing up his hands. I've got beers waiting for me at home. When he twisted away from the pool, the concrete walls flared to a soft red and blue glow, like someone was sliding the dimmer on a neon open sign. The humidity clinging to Edward's skin crystallized into a fine frost. A translucent woman hovered above the water, her hair slick and tangled as if floating in zero gravity. Her skin was pale and wrinkled, like a cheap latex Halloween mask, while darkness pooled around her eyes. In the center of that darkness, pupils that burned like red-hot, smoldering coals. Edward felt like he stood too close to an exploding firework, half awe, half terror. The woman's voice was a wet, gargled whisper. You were given a precious gift, Edward. You've wasted it. Gift? Edward asked, his tone tinged with fearful sarcasm. There haven't been any blessings in this train wreck of a life. What are you talking about? The apparition's eyes flared hotter. She floated in silence, her gaze drilling into Edward's soul. The gift of life. Now you've ruined yours and mine. Fear spread through him like a nest of fire ants, sharp, relentless bites crawling over every inch of his skin. The water beneath the ghost churned, a vortex forming as if a bathtub were draining. It swelled and accelerated, the suction growing strong enough to yank Edward's shirt, which flapped helplessly like a flag in the wind. He tried to run, but each footfall slipped on the wet tile, pulling him backward until he crashed into the pool's edge. Edward spun violently, his arms flailing, until he vanished beneath the churning surface. The ghost of Linda Rue drifted downward, and a sudden calm settled over the pool. Tilda, shut up, it's coming on, Bill barked to the other security guard. Both hunched over the flickering monitor. The TV news anchor was describing a drowning at the university pool. A live feed showed a young reporter standing outside the school's main doors, microphone in hand. Police have identified the victim as 25-year-old Edward Cook, she said matter-of-factly. A man with a troubled past, He was recently employed as a night custodian at the university. Now, police don't suspect foul play in this incident, but a Channel 7 News investigation has revealed that Cook was involved in a near-fatal drowning at this very same pool 20 years ago. Based on interviews with family and friends, along with archived news stories, we've confirmed Cook had slipped into the deep end of the pool and was rescued by a lifeguard on duty. However, after getting the boy to safety, the woman suffered a medical episode as a result of an undiagnosed heart condition. 22-year-old Linda Rue drowned in the pool while saving Cook's life.